And we are a part of that. And today is a celebration of that. But it's not all outgoing, outreaching, the motion induced by this season. No, the flowering of our spirit, hemisphere, and schedules, central to that flowering is the sense of return. Not just reaching out, but a return. It is odd to say, but central to our reaching out is a sense of it coming round again. And that is true simply because we do this every year. It's a cycle, or at least a spiral. We cross the same threshold year after year, but in a slightly different place in our lives. And days like today mark that change and mark that cyclical consistency. To me, that's meaningful. It's important and carries resonances. That idea that we return again and again, even as we reach out, it resonates with many of the holidays that we're celebrating right now, with Flower Communion, I think fairly clearly. However, the sense of cycle, flowers, they live, they die. Celebrate this every year. The cycle continues. The earth spins. We come back through the seasons. That's clear to me. But the sense of the cycle is more nuanced, for me anyway, in the message of Easter. Specifically in the death and resurrection of Jesus. And because nuance is fun, that's where we'll go. So Easter as a holiday, speaking in gross generalities, most you feel an affinity toward it as a tradition, but a departure from it theologically. You all know that. You do not hold that Christ literally came back from the dead. At most, we might proclaim that he is risen as the body of the church, the Christian church, of which we are derivative. Wherever two or more are gathered, said the preacher from Nazareth, there too I will be. So we kind of get that sense of resurrection. That said, most Christian identified persons proclaim and celebrate the biological resurrection of Christ. To my mind, this is a hijacking, no offense, this is a hijacking of the wise, mythical mind. As I see it, the whole point of the Jesus story, or certainly one of the central points of the Jesus story, is to reconnect humans with the divine. Where the divine can be recognized in broad terms as the churning, creative, all-encompassing matrix of loving relationship. That the divine incarnates in the body of a human, in this case the son of a carpenter, means that God is not out there, separate from the human, a being to be mediated only by priests. The divine is not something other. Rather, God is incarnate in the human and in all creation. That's what I take from the story of Jesus, and thus in the embodiment of the divine in Jesus, humans are invited to remember. We are invited to remember that the human shares a fundamental divinity with all creation. And that is in the aggregate whole, all of it together, and in its particulars, right down to the atomic and the subatomic. And in all of the emergent phenomena that arises from its manifold material interactions. Now, setting aside the nebulous historicity of Jesus, we can understand that this, our shared divinity with all that we sense and all that we cannot sense, is the meaning of his tale, the story of Jesus. It's a narrative that begins at Christmas. Christmas is all about that incarnation I just went on about. Christmas is about that moment when we feel most disconnected, most in the dark, and how that is the moment in the depth of winter, maybe the winter of our heart, when connection is most needed, most invited, and reestablished. The eternal divine inhabits mortal flesh, or is recognized to do so. Easter, however, seems to be more of a decoupling, a disincarnation, at least in part. It's a mythologically kind of a tricky move, and I'll try to say it plainly as I can. The hero dies. The tale continues. In death, the body ceases. There is nothing left for the divine to inhabit. But the divine does not cease. The divine is eternal. The corporeal is transitory. Ironically, it is the ephemeral that is permanent, and the material temporary. But the eternal is beyond our comprehension. We can only sniff at it, hint at it. So there are three basic ways or metaphors, I think, that we use to think about eternity, to conceive of what eternity might be like. Or I think we in the West, with our sense of history and future, tend to think about eternity as being a line that extends forever. But this makes the eternal feel totally irrelevant, non-human, non-relatable, and sort of a waste of time to seek wisdom from. Another way to think about the eternal is as a sphere, a globe, or some non-linear shape, an amoeba, expanding in all directions and all dimensions. This is sort of the line idea, but in 360 degrees. It feels a little more relevant because it is encompassing. But it is still a little cold, and its wisdom remains remote. The third way that we think about eternity is not as a line, nor as a sphere, but rather as a circle, a cycle, an eternal return. Thus, we have what feels paradoxical to our linear minds, an eternity comprised of constant returnings. That paradox in narrative form, mythologized, that's the resurrection. It is an eternal return. 3 days after the crucifixion and every year. It is an eternal return of an all-encompassing matrix of loving relationship. It does not cease. Though we mark it in time, It is not bound by time, nor by death. Death, then, and the fear of it, in the Christian story and the way that we are extrapolating from that story, death is not the end. It is simply a departure from our particularity and our understanding of a linear universe. That we are beings of love, and love persists through all temporally understood material, from our bodies to political systems, is the message of Easter. Winters pass, everything comes and goes. Love persists eternally. We see that in the cycle of the seasons and the resurrection of love incarnate. And we are invited to see that in ourselves. It is within you. Even when you feel dead inside, even when you are miserable or wretched or guilty or angry or any of death's offspring, love, eternal love, is incarnate in you. It is in you even now. It is waiting only your attention. Only your invitation, only your memory that it is already there. And this is a day to remind ourselves of that. We use time to remind us of our eternal nature. So what is the relationship between flower communion and Easter? Not every UU church celebrates the two on the same day, though it seems to me, based on my thorough examination of collegial Facebook feeds, that it is fairly common, and by very thorough, I mean not very thorough, but it does seem that it's fairly common, and maybe ever more so. And I think that they do form a productive relationship and resonate with one another. Linda recalled for us earlier how flower communion came to be. It was a ceremony commemorating and appreciating community. And it was, or has become, a celebration of unique gifts brought to that community and derived from that community. Those unique gifts symbolically represented by the uniqueness of each flower. It is a ritual of giving and receiving, and there is a cycle there. An opportunity to touch base with your eternal nature. But it is also a ritual reminding us that our gifts come by grace. We did nothing to make these flowers grow. Their molecular miracle is beyond our design. It's grace. It's also, flower communion, a ritual of dissemination, a reminder to bring our grace-given gifts from the world into church where they can be imbued with a communal meaning and significance, and then taken once again into the world. We bring our gifts here, we share them with one another, and we take our gifts from here into the world. This cycle spins us into connection through community, and through that into communion with nature, made more relatable by our ceremony, nature that by our ritual we are now drawn closer to. And here we are invited to remember our interbeing with all creatures of our earth and sky. And then, of course, even in their beauty, the flowers are dying. And death does play a significant role in this Easter holiday, and it is something that we must all learn to cope with, not only for our own peace of mind as we near the end or say goodbye to a loved one, but rather for when our observation that we are a part of an interdependent web of existence shifts from a theory based on observation into a felt knowing. In other words, I think most of us are pretty comfortable with the statement that everything is interconnected. The implications that that statement has are profound and will affect our concept of our identity as being unique and separate. When we feel our interconnection with the world, there will be a moment that to our minds, schooled in atomistic individualism, that will feel like death. And if we are to shift from aspiration of that seventh principle to experience of that seventh principle, we will need the assurance of the resurrection narrative, the life beyond the linear, of the persistence of meaning beyond the particular. So this then, our flower communion, is a practice. For our gospel. We will need to remember that though these flowers are dying, their meaning and their memory and the memory of this day will not die. Their meaning persists beyond their matter. Their meaning is in us and between us. And their meaning is in our actions inspired by what they come to mean. What they come to mean is the uniqueness and shared gifts of our community, and that will and ought and can inspire us to action in the world. Their meaning is, in fact, the same as God, the same as community, the same as our meaning and what we aspire to and what we are generated by. It is nothing other than love and connection. The cycle of the seasons remind us of love's eternal yearning to be. When you see the beautiful yellow pollen on the Palo Verdes and are conflicted by the sense that you know that they are beautiful and that you are about to sneeze. That's just the Palo Verde trying to love the world. The cycle of the seasons remind us of love's eternal yearning to be. And now we will bring that forth. So could I get Tom and Zombor and Kimberly again? And Peter, could I have you go get the kids, please? All right, so we're going to demonstrate this again. You guys are going to form 2 lines. Oh, Peter, could you get the children? The children, yeah. You guys are going to form 2 lines starting here. I'll invite Jean-Bart to go first and pick a flower. I ask, what gifts do they bring?
Beauty.
Beauty. What gifts will you take forth?
Peace and love.
Peace and love. And so now, Tom, you can sit down. Kimberly, you grab a flower. What gifts do they bring? Curiosity. What gifts will you take forth?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. And you would sit down. And if it gets messy, we'll figure it out. Can I invite you to stand and come forward in 2 lines, forming in back of Linda and Kimberly? Down the side aisles here. You might want to move to the side aisles. Can you? What gifts do they bring? Humor. What gift will you take forth? Bravery. Okay. Eli, what gifts does Linda bring, or does Zayden bring? Hope. Okay, give him the flower. Zayden and Linda, what gifts will you take forth? Family. You could sit down. Now you pick up a flower. Amani, what gifts does Eli bring? Hope. Okay, give him the flower. Eli, what gift will you take home today into the world? Your mom. Very good. You take a flower. Okay. What gift do they bring? You say, what gift does she bring? Humor. What gift will you take forth from this community? Love. What gift does she bring? Happiness. Cora, what gift will you take forth from here? Peace. What gift does she bring? Accepting others. Give her the flower. Minnie, what gift will you take forth? Happiness. What gift does Erica bring? Joy. Erica, what gift will you take home today and out into the world? Peace. Evelyn, what gift does this child bring? Delight. And she will take love. Okay, Addie. What gift does Evelyn bring? She does bring happiness. And what gift will you bring, Evelyn, or take with you? Laughter. What gift does Addie bring? Great joy. Addie, what do you think you're going to take home today from church? Peace. All right. What gift does she bring? True spirit. And what gift will you take forth? Love. What gift does she bring? Energy. And Star, what will you take forth? Rebirth. Yeah. Oh, wait. What gift does Ron bring? Health. And what will you take forth from this community? Thankfulness. Wait. Yeah. What gift does Deb bring? Curiosity and joy. And joy, what will you take forth Deb, what will you take forth into the world? Hope. Conrad, what does Betty bring? Affirmation. And Betty, what will you take forth into the world? She'll take affirmation, okay. What does Conrad bring? Wisdom. Conrad, what will you take forth? Understanding. What does Bob bring? Insight. And Bob, what will you take forth from this community? Gratitude. What does she bring? What does she bring? Yes. Devotion. And Jane, what will you take forth? What will you take forth from this community? Connection. Devotion and connection. What does Kathy bring? Steadiness. Kathy, what will you take forth from here? Friendship. What does Hannah bring? Energy. And Hannah, what will you take forth? Thoughtfulness. What does Anne bring? Curiosity. Here, give this to her. She needs more. And what will you take forth, Anne? Perseverance. Curiosity and perseverance. What does she bring? Growth. And what will you take forth? Acceptance. What does Chuck bring? Trust and love. And what will you take forth, Chuck? Continuity and strength. What does she bring? Spirit. And what will you take forth? What will you? Perseverance from this community. What does Elizabeth bring? A beautiful spirit. And what will you take forth from this community? Appreciation. What does she bring? Relationship. And what will you take forth? Say again. Tolerance. What does she bring? Music. And what will you take forth? Joy. What does Barbara bring? Poetry. And what will you take forth? Beauty. What does Deb bring? Energy. And what will you take forth? Justice. What does she bring? Connection. And what will you take forth? Hope. What does she bring? What does she bring to this community and your life? Love. You could give her the flowers. And what will you take forth? Good health. What does he bring? Empathy. And what will you leave here with today? Love. Thank you. You can sit down. No, you can go sit down now. Sit down. You can sit down, take them with you, yeah. What does he bring? Beauty. And what will you take forth? Understanding. What does she bring? What does she bring? Community. And what will you take forth from this community? Friendships. What does he bring? Devotion. Let me give it to him. What will you take forth, Richard? Justice. What does she bring? Service. Give it in. And what will you take from this community today? Hope. And what does Jyotsna bring? Relationship. And what will you take into the world? Nonviolence. What does Samar bring into this community? Respect. And Samar, what will you take into the world? Patience. What does he bring into this community? Kindness. And what will you take from this community into the world? Hope. What does he bring? Diversity. And what will you take with you into the world from here? Beauty. Thank you. What does he bring? Friendship. And what will you take with you into the world? Community. What does she bring? Awesomeness. And what will you take with you into the world? Gratitude. And what does she bring to this community? Friendship. And what will you take from this community into the world? Thanks. Let's see. What does she bring? Kindness. And what will you take with you today into the world? Acceptance. What does she bring? Connection. And what will you take? Love. Yeah. What does Sunny bring? Acceptance. And both of them, actually. And what will you take with you into the world? Kindred spirit. What does she bring? Empathy. And what will you take with you into the world? Fabulousness. What does John bring into our community? A thoughtful heart. And John, what will you take into the world? Beauty. What does she bring to this community? Caring. And what will you take into the world? A sense of belonging. What does Peter bring to this community? Harmony. And Peter, what will you take into the world? Joy. Stay right here. Oh, stay right here. What does she take into the, or bring? That's all right. You just leave that here. What does she bring to this community? Success. And what will you take into the world from this community? Harmony. What does she bring to our community? Respect. And what will you take into the world today? love. What does he bring into this community? Laughter. And what will you take home and into the world? Respect. What does she bring to this community? Youth. And what will you take with you into the world? Art. What does she bring to this community? Joy. And what will you take with you into the world? Gratitude. What does she bring to this community? Acceptance. And what will you take with you into the world? Tranquility. What does she bring to this community? Evenness. And what will you take into this world? Grace. You have consecrated these flowers, consecrated each other, consecrated a world. Consecration is not a transformation of the consecrated. The flowers, your fellows, and the world are already sacred. Consecration transforms the consecrator, transforms your understanding about yourself. Your gifts cycle through the world. Their meaning will not die, but will resurrect in the being of the world.